No, don't you? My name is Janet, and I was the luckiest woman alive. You see, I married Robert, the kind of man dreams are made of. Picture this. A tall man with a smile that could melt even the coldest of hearts and eyes, that looked at you like you were the only person in the world. That's how it was for us from our very first date at a quaint little coffee shop to our breathtaking wedding, and everything in between. The day of our wedding was unlike any other. Each moment felt like it was plucked from a fairy tale. "You look absolutely stunning," Robert whispered to me as I walked down the aisle, my heart full to bursting. "And you look incredibly handsome," I replied, my eyes glistening with tears of joy. As we stood there in front of friends and family, I felt as if time had stopped. "I promise to be your rock, your love, and your eternal companion," Robert vowed, looking deep into my eyes. "And I promise to stand beside you through every high and every low," I pledged back, my voice tinged with emotion. Our vows were not just words, they were promises etched into our souls as permanent as the rings we then exchanged. The ceremony was followed by a reception that was nothing short of magical. We danced our first dance to At Last by Etta James, and every person in that room could feel the love radiating off of us. As we swayed to the music, Robert pulled me close and said, "You know, I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now." "And I feel like the luckiest woman," I replied, laying my head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. Our honeymoon was another chapter of our storybook love affair. We flew to a secluded beach resort, spending days exploring and nights stargazing. It was during these quiet moments that Robert would often say, "We're building a life, Janet, a beautiful endless life together." "And I wouldn't want to build it with anyone else," I would reply, my heart swelling with love and gratitude. We returned from our honeymoon to start what we both knew would be an incredible journey together. Every day felt like an adventure, whether we were trying out new recipes in the kitchen or planning weekend getaways. Even mundane tasks like grocery shopping were made special because we did them together. "Hey, should we get red or white wine for tonight?" Robert would often ask, his eyes scanning the wine aisle. "Red, always red," I'd answer, reminding us both of our first date, where we shared a bottle of red wine, talking and laughing until the restaurant closed. Our life was a beautiful tapestry of these shared experiences and mutual love. We celebrated anniversaries and milestones, each one becoming a new page in the love story that we were writing every day. We didn't just exist alongside each other, we truly lived. Our hearts were entwined in a way that made it impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. That's why when the darkness eventually came, it didn't just dim the lights. It felt like it was trying to extinguish the flame of our love. But we held on, and our love only grew stronger. It felt as if our entire world was plunged into an unyielding night. But before the night came, we reveled in the day, basking in a love that we thought could withstand anything. And in many ways, it did. Our love became our anchor, holding us steady through the tempest that was soon to come. But that's a chapter for another time. In this chapter we were happy, unbelievably, unequivocally happy. And while the subsequent chapters would test us in ways we could have never imagined, nothing could ever truly erase the sheer bliss of this first chapter. The chapter of a love that once was. 2 years after we pledged our eternal love to each other, the skies of our perfect world started to darken. The first hint of the impending storm came when Robert began to feel unusually fatigued. At first, we attributed it to his long work hours and the demands of our daily lives. "Maybe you just need some rest, a short break to recharge," I suggested one evening, concerned by how exhausted he looked. "Yeah, maybe you're right," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But even after taking a few days off, the tiredness persisted, accompanied by a general sense of malaise that neither of us could ignore. Finally, after weeks of denial, we made a doctor's appointment. I remember holding Robert's hand in the waiting room, both of us masked with uneasy smiles. "It's probably nothing, just some minor issue easily sorted out," he assured me, squeezing my hand. "I hope so," I said, trying to hold on to that hope as tightly as I held onto his hand. When the test results came back, the room seemed to close in on us, walls compressing, air thickening. "I'm afraid it's cancer," the doctor said, his voice tinged with regret. "Cancer. That word," reverberated in our minds, disrupting the happy narrative we had so carefully built. Robert looked at me, his eyes clouded with a mixture of fear and sadness. "I'm so sorry, Janet," he whispered, as if it were his fault, as if he had any control over the rogue cells that had decided to wage war on his body. "No, don't you dare apologize," I said, tears filling my eyes. "We'll fight this. Together you're not alone and you'll never be." We took on the disease with all the tenacity and love that had defined our relationship up until then. There were countless doctor appointments, treatments, and late-night Google searches about alternative therapies. Our living room became a maze of medication bottles, and our calendar was filled with reminders for chemotherapy sessions and consultations. We tried to maintain a sense of normalcy amid the chaos. Robert would make jokes to lighten the mood, often turning to gallows humor. "Well, if the treatments don't work, at least I'll have an excuse to get out of mowing the lawn forever," he would say, forcing a laugh. "I'd rather have you in an overgrown lawn than a neat yard and an empty house," I'd reply, trying to hold on to hope. Trying to match his humor but choking on my words. Through it all, we continued to be each other's rock. On the days when Robert was too sick to get out of bed, I would lie next to him, holding him, trying to absorb some of his pain. On the days when I felt like I was drowning in despair, Robert would pull me up, reminding me that love, even in the face of mortal peril, was worth fighting for. "We'll get through this, won't we?" he asked me one evening, after a particularly grueling round of treatment. "We will," I affirmed, wanting so badly for that statement to be true. Despite the high walls of optimism we built, the storm raged on, each wave crashing harder than the last, eroding the fortress of hope we had so meticulously constructed. It was a 2-year battle, marked by small victories and monumental defeats. And though we fought valiantly side by side, the sad reality was that love, no matter how deep or true, couldn't change the prognosis. As the storm finally overwhelmed us, we clung to each other one last time, realizing that even the strongest ships sometimes sink in the tempest. And so, after 2 tumultuous years, the storm claimed its victory, leaving me alone and shipwrecked in a world that would never be the same again. Just when I thought my world couldn't fracture any more than it already had, another tremor shook the foundations of my life. My grandmother, the matriarch of our family, and a woman of unparalleled wisdom and love, passed away a few months after Robert. She was old, and she lived a good life, my mom said, trying to offer me some consolation. "Yeah, but why does it feel like the universe is just taking everything away from me?" I responded, my voice tinged with bitterness. My grandmother and I had always been close. She was the one who taught me how to bake, how to knit, and how to navigate the complicated tapestry of human emotions. In her will, she left me her house, a gorgeous turn-of-the-century home filled with memories and valued at a staggering $1 million. Walking through its empty halls after the lawyers confirmed the inheritance, I felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. "Oh, Grandma, I wish you were here to guide me," I murmured to myself, my voice echoing in the emptiness. With its wooden floors and intricate crown moldings, the house was an architectural masterpiece. Yet, as I wandered from room to room, all I could think about was how this beautiful space would forever remain incomplete. Robert would never see it, and we would never make memories within its walls. As I was contemplating this, I received a call that disrupted my reverie. It was Diane, Robert's mother. "Janet, dear, how are you holding up?" she asked, her voice oozing a sweetness that I found disconcerting, given our less-than-close relationship over the years. "I'm getting by, Diane. How about you and Lisa?" I answered cautiously, mentioning Robert's sister. "Oh, times have been tough for all of us. Listen, I was wondering if you could do us a favor. Your new home is quite spacious, isn't it? Do you think you could offer us a place to stay for a while?" she inquired. I paused, pondering the request. It was true that the house was big, far too big for just one person. And despite the uneasy relationship I had with Diane and Lisa, they were still Robert's family. I'm sure Robert would have wanted me to take care of his family, I thought. "Of course you're welcome to stay," I finally said, setting into motion a series of events that I couldn't have foreseen. Within a week, Diane and Lisa moved in. At first, things seemed fine. We occupied different wings of the house, and they were polite, if not particularly warm. But gradually, the dynamics began to shift in ways that made me increasingly uncomfortable. "Would you mind if we moved some of our furniture into the living room?" Diane asked one day. "These old pieces just don't go with our style." Sure, I consented, uneasy but telling myself that compromise was essential when living with others. Soon, their belongings began to take over the house. Family portraits of Robert and me were replaced with their pictures and trinkets. Spaces that I had designated for my own use were slowly encroached upon. It was as if they were marking their territory, staking a claim to a life that was never truly theirs to begin with. Amidst these strange happenings, I tried to hold on to my composure, reminding myself that they too had been through a lot. But the uneasy feeling grew, like a dark cloud accumulating weight, ready to burst open at any moment. And burst open it did, but that's a chapter for another time. For now, let's just say that the windfall that had seemed like a potential bright spot in a bleak sky was becoming the eye of yet another storm. A storm that threatened to sweep away the last vestiges of the life I had known. Life in the house became increasingly strained as the weeks wore on. Diane and Lisa seemed to make themselves more and more at home, their belongings slowly spilling into the common areas, and even into spaces I had considered private sanctuaries. I found it odd, but I kept telling myself that they were grieving in their own way, and maybe this was their method of coping, by clinging to a place that tied them to Robert. Then came the morning that shattered any illusions I had about their intentions. I woke up unusually early and headed downstairs for a cup of coffee. As I neared the bottom of the staircase, I heard hushed voices coming from the living room. "We need to talk to her about it soon. We can't keep waiting," Lisa whispered. I know, but she's so emotional." "We have to tread carefully. Once she signs, the house will be legally ours," Diane responded. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, a cold sense of realization washing over me. They were planning to take the house, my house, right from under my feet. I couldn't believe it. Had their grief manifested into greed, or had they been opportunistic from the very beginning? In that moment, any lingering sympathy I felt for them evaporated. I retreated quietly back upstairs, my mind racing. I was furious but also scared. I had let them into my home and now they were plotting to take it from me. And they were doing it in such a calculated, insidious way that it left me reeling. A couple of days after overhearing their conversation, Diane approached me. "Janet, could we talk? There's something important we need to discuss." "Of course," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. Diane handed me a document. "We think it would be best for everyone if you could sign this." My eyes scanned the text. It was a legal document stating that I was transferring ownership of the house to Diane and Lisa. I couldn't believe the audacity. My hand trembled as I held the paper. Images of Robert and our life together flooded my mind. Would he have wanted this, I thought, before immediately answering my own question. "I can't sign this, Diane. This is my house. I'm sorry for whatever hardship you're facing, but I can't give you my home," I said, my voice tinged with a resolve I hadn't felt in a long time. Diane looked at me, her eyes narrowing. "Robert would be so disappointed in you. We're his family. He would have wanted us to have a place to live. Robert would have wanted me to be happy and secure in my own home. He would never approve of you trying to manipulate me into giving it away," I retorted. For a moment, Diane looked like she was going to argue further, but something in my eyes must have told her not to. She sighed, a long, heavy sigh filled with the weight of a plan gone awry. "I guess we'll be packing our things then," she said, her voice heavy with unspoken recriminations. "Yes, you will," I affirmed. As Diane and Lisa moved out, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and sadness. They were my connection to Robert, however tenuous and fraught that connection had been. In removing them from my life, I was severing one of the last physical ties I had to him. But sometimes, to move forward, you have to let go, even if what you're letting go of is a piece of your past. In the quiet that settled after their departure, I found something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Peace. It was a fragile, delicate peace, one that could be easily shattered by the memories that still haunted the corners of my mind. But it was a start, and sometimes that's all you need. For a few weeks after Diane and Lisa left, life began to regain some semblance of normality. Or at least as normal as it could be given the gaping hole Robert's absence had left in my life. The house was finally mine again, a space I could grieve and heal in without the intrusion of unwelcome guests. But just when I thought I could breathe, another unsettling development took place. I received a call from an old friend of Robert's, Alex, who had been close to us both but had moved away for work a few years back. He was in town and wanted to catch up. Remembering our old friendship, I agreed. We met at a local cafe, and as we chatted about this and that, I sensed that Alex had something more on his mind. Finally, he got to it. "Janet, I heard about what happened with Diane and Lisa. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." "I'm managing, Alex. Thank you for asking," I replied cautiously. "Well, there's something you should know. I didn't want to bring this up, but given what you've been through, I think it's important." Alex hesitated before continuing. "Robert told me a few years back that he was worried about his mom and sister. He didn't go into details but hinted that they had some, let's say, questionable motives when it came to family assets. What are you saying?" I asked, my voice tinged with a combination of curiosity and dread. "I'm saying that Robert might have suspected them of being capable of exactly what they tried to do to you. I didn't think it was my place to say anything before, but now I think you should be cautious, even if they're out of the house." My mind reeled. If what Alex was saying was true, then Robert had harbored suspicions about his own family, something he'd never shared with me. Was this the family secret that had always kept him a bit distant from his mother and sister? Why didn't he ever tell me? I found myself murmuring, half to Alex and half to myself. "I can't answer that, Janet. Maybe he didn't want to worry you, or perhaps he was in denial himself. Family complications have a way of clouding our judgment." Alex sighed, his eyes filled with a mix of sadness and concern. "You're telling me this now. Why? Do you think they might try something again?" I asked, suddenly alarmed at the thought. "I don't know, but forewarned is forearmed, right?" Alex responded. As I drove home, Alex's words kept echoing in my mind. If Robert had known about his family's tendencies, why hadn't he warned me? We had promised to face all storms together. Had he kept this from me to protect me, or had he been trying to protect himself from a painful truth? The realization that he had carried this burden alone left me feeling more isolated than ever. But along with the hurt, there was also a newfound sense of wariness. Diane and Lisa had shown their true colors, and Alex's revelation suggested that this might not have been an isolated incident, but part of a long-standing pattern of behavior. It made me reconsider the wisdom of letting them back into my life, should they ever try to re-establish contact. At home, I found myself double-checking all the locks, reviewing the security system, even going through legal documents to ensure that no loopholes existed that could allow Diane and Lisa to make another play for the house or anything else. The sanctuary that my home had once represented now felt fraught with the echoes of betrayals, both past and potentially future. Yet it was still my sanctuary, and I realized that the only way to reclaim it, to truly make it mine again, was to face these uncomfortable truths head-on. As painful as it was, this revelation was also my armor against any future schemes Diane and Lisa might have up their sleeves. I was alone, but I was also awake and alert, and that realization empowered me more than I had felt in a long time. Months went by, and the seasons changed as they inevitably do. The initial awkwardness of living alone gradually settled into a pattern, a new routine that was solely mine. My interactions with Diana and Lisa were virtually non-existent, a boundary I was thankful for. As predicted, they had made a few attempts to reach out, but I kept my distance, fortified by the information Alex had shared with me. Then one day a letter arrived in the mail. It was from a law firm, indicating that Diane was challenging Robert's last will, claiming it had been signed under duress. My heart sank as I read the legal jargon. The audacity of the move left me flabbergasted. Even in death, it seemed Robert couldn't escape the clutches of his family's manipulations. "Enough is enough," I muttered to myself, gripping the letter in my hands as if I could squeeze the audacity out of it. "This ends now?" I reached out to my lawyer, scheduling an emergency meeting to discuss how to counter this new attack. When we sat down, she reviewed the case and assured me that we had a strong standing to protect my rights and Robert's last wishes. "Don't worry, Janet. We'll fight this and make sure justice is served," she said firmly, locking eyes with me across the table. "Thank you. I don't care what it takes. I will not let them tarnish Robert's memory or take what he wanted for us," I replied, a sense of resolute determination settling over me. The court proceedings were grueling, emotionally taxing events that stretched over several months. Diane and Lisa, ever defiant, claimed that I had unduly influenced Robert into making the will, but my lawyer was exceptional, bringing forth irrefutable evidence of Robert's lucidity and intent, including testimonies from friends and even old video recordings of Robert explicitly talking about his will. "Your Honor, it's clear that Mr. Robert had full control of his faculties when he made these decisions. The plaintiff's allegations are not only baseless, but also a direct insult to the man's memory," my lawyer argued vehemently in court. Finally, the judge ruled in my favor, upholding Robert's original will and thereby solidifying my ownership of the house and other assets. Diane and Lisa were ordered to pay for the legal fees, a small but satisfying victory. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying until that moment. It was as if I had been holding my breath for months, waiting for the axe to fall, and I could finally breathe again. "Congratulations, Janet. You stood your ground and justice prevailed," my lawyer said, shaking my hand. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you," I replied, realizing that for the first time in a long time I felt strong, almost invincible. Robert had once been my rock, my fortress against the storms of life. Now I have learned to be my own fortress, built from the bricks of resilience, hardship, and an unyielding determination to honor the love we have.